Hi, my name's Ben from ITIQ Group. Today we're going to be talking all about Teams Phone. So what is Teams Phone? Well, most people will be familiar with Microsoft Teams, but perhaps not in using it as day-to-day as a telephone system. You may already have a desk phone, you may already have your mobile phone, but today we're going to be talking about deploying a phone system within the Teams application that can replace those other systems. It's important because if any of your existing other systems rely on copper is going to be out 2025. BT are phasing it out and it's all moving over to something called Voice over IP, which is basically a fancy way of saying telephone over the internet. Now, Voice over IP systems you can have still deployed on premise, so you can still have a box in the office which deals with the Voice over IP, or you can have a cloud-based system, of which Teams Phone is one. Cloud-based systems are favoured for lots of reasons. They're very flexible, they're very scalable, and the costs are all operating expenditure, which helps reduce the initial outlay. One thing I get asked quite often is, can you have a handset with Teams Phone? Absolutely, you can have a handset with Teams Phone. It's not actually something I would have recommended 2 or 3 months ago, but Microsoft have changed the way it works, and it actually works really well now. There's also a lot of benefits to being able to deploy it on your mobile phone. So of course, because you can have the app, you download the app, put it on your mobile phone, it enables you to have one number that really follows you around, so that if you're using your laptop, you can use the app on your laptop. If you're at your desk, you could use a desk phone or the app, or you could use your mobile if you're out and about. So, without further ado, let's get hands-on and have a look at how to get the most from Teams Phone. Right, so the first thing to do is to get Teams open. Once we've got Teams open, let's go to the call section. So if you go all the way to the left of the page, you may not have the telephone symbol that says calls there. If you don't, click the 3 dots that says View More Apps, start typing in calls, and you'll see the phone symbol appear. Now right mouse click on it and click Pin, and that will make sure it remains on that left-hand taskbar every time you come into the application. So we'll click on calls. Now we're going to do some of the basic setting configuration. So there are 2 places to go to find the settings. One is the 3 dots at the top of the screen, where you can see it says Settings and More. And the other one, which is quite a nice quick one, is down the bottom of the screen where it says High Definition Audio Device. Click the drop down and you'll see it says Device Settings. So once we got device settings open, first off, let's go to the call configuration. So underneath settings, scroll down to where it says calls. I'll explain all of the options here. So first of all, we've got call handling and forwarding, and you can toggle whether to forward all calls or not. Of course, if you forward all of your calls, then you're never going to receive one. It's either going to go to voicemail or it's going to cut off or get routed according to how you've configured these following settings. So when you receive a call, you can choose Do Not Ring Anyone Else. You can choose Also Ring a New Number or Contact. So if you wanted it to ring a colleague, perhaps if you're on holiday, you can set it to do that. And then underneath that, you can choose what happens when you can't answer a call. So you can choose redirect to voicemail, you can choose do not redirect calls, i.e. it won't go to voicemail and it won't go to anybody else, it will just ring out. Or you can choose redirect to a new number or contact. So again, perhaps you would like it to ring you initially and then to ring one of your contacts. You can do that as well. After that, you can choose how many seconds it rings before redirecting. And then a little bit further down, you've got caller ID, and you can elect whether to hide your caller ID. One point of note on this, I think, is just that lots of organisations will set up the system so that when you dial out, it won't actually be your direct dial that's shown to the caller, it will be the switchboard number. If that's the case, especially, I would suggest perhaps not hiding your caller ID. Underneath that, you can choose ringtones according to sort of various actions. Then we can choose Manage Voicemail. So this is where you come if you want to record your own greeting. You can click Record a Greeting and record your own voice. I would suggest you keep the language set to English, and underneath that you can choose what happens when the call is redirected to a voicemail. Now this has got some really quite neat options in here. So you can let the caller record a message. You can let the caller record a message or be transferred to somebody else. You can play your greeting and end the call, or you can play your greeting, then transfer the call to somebody else. So there's a few options there. I think letting the caller record a message or be transferred to someone else gives the caller quite a lot of choice, and actually is really useful in certain circumstances, particularly if there are certain days of the week, perhaps at your work, or if you're due to go on a longer term leave. Underneath that, we can set up text to speech. This is basically, if you don't want to record your own voice for your voicemail, you can type a message in here and your callers will hear that. Underneath here, we've got manage out of office voicemail. Now, there's a lot of really clever stuff in here that we will go into a little bit more detail when we talk about presence-based routing. But basically what this does is it ties in with our Microsoft Outlook and our Teams presence, and it will do things like look at when we've got meetings or when we're on other calls or what work we've got scheduled, and it will apply the voicemail or whatever call redirect you've set up according to that. So it's really quite clever. So the three options we've got here are play your greeting all the time, or play your greeting when Outlook automatic replies are on, or play your greeting when I have an out of office event on my calendar. And in the space below, you can put another greeting specifically for that setting if that's what you want to do. Underneath that, we can create what's called a call group, and what this essentially means is that we can elect other people to receive calls on our behalf. Now, you can edit this at any point. You can come back into this menu. Once you've added a few people in here, you'll be able to remove them in the same place. Underneath that, finally for the calls menu, we've got delegates. And if you've not come across the concept of delegates elsewhere in Microsoft 365, like for instance with the Outlook emails, basically what you're doing, if you assign a delegate, and in order to do that, you would click add a delegate and do it in the same way as you've just done with the groups. But by adding a delegate, you're essentially saying this person has the right to make or receive calls exactly as if they were me. So perhaps if you've got a personal assistant, or perhaps if you've got somebody you work particularly closely with, that might be a useful function. Now we've had the chance to have a look at calls, let's have a look at one really important setting in devices. So two tabs down underneath settings, we'll click on devices. Actually probably just also worth noting, up at the top you can set standard stuff like your speaker and your microphone, and actually you can make a test call as well. So the first time you use Teams, probably worth making a test call, because it will just enable you to check that your microphone's working and your speaker's working. Underneath this, we've got noise suppression. Worth mentioning actually, if you're working from home, it's quite nice. Say you've got I don't know, a dog that barks, or perhaps some children or something like that make a bit of background noise. You can choose the noise suppression level within here. I actually find the default is pretty good, the auto, but you can do that manually. The thing I really wanted to specifically mention here is the secondary ringer. So what this is all about is maybe you're using the Teams desktop app in the office, and you might well have a headset plugged in. In the event you do have a headset plugged in and you take it off, perhaps it's getting a bit too hot, or you've done something else and forgotten to put it back on, when you have an incoming call, it's going to ring inside the headset. But unless you change this setting, it's just going to ring inside the headset, which will mean you may well miss the call. So in those circumstances, it's really important to come to this secondary ringer and then just choose the laptop or the desktop speakers, or whatever speakers you've got available there. Now, just as the final part of the initial kind of setup, I want to go a little bit further up in the settings menu and have a look at privacy. Now, some of this ties in a bit with what I talked about before in terms of the presence-based routing. So that's how Teams looks at your availability in terms of whether you're on another call. It'll look at your Outlook calendar and see what appointments you've got in there. But let's say you've got one or two people you really want to be able to reach you no matter what, maybe your boss or your spouse. You can come into where it says manage priority access, and you can put in the names and numbers for whoever those people are, and it doesn't matter what setting you've got, those phone numbers will then come through. Just underneath that, you've also got the ability to block contacts, and you'll see there's an option to block all contacts with no caller ID, but I probably wouldn't recommend putting that on because quite often there are good reasons why people's numbers may be blocked. But if you're getting nuisance calls, you can add those callers to the list of blocked contacts, and if you were to decide perhaps one of those users was no longer a nuisance caller, you might decide to unblock them, and you could come into here and unblock them. So you'll be pleased to know that's it for the main setup. We've done that. So now let's have a little look at the navigation, making and receiving calls, and other features. So if we come back to the call screen just by clicking the telephone button, you'll see the screen is split into three vertically. We've got the left-hand section with the keypad, we've got the middle section which will show all the call history, and you can switch between all and missed and incoming and voicemail. I'm not actually going to click those because this is a setup which has got people in it, and for confidentiality reasons I can't click those buttons. And on the right hand side we've got speed dials. So on the right hand side we can configure, if we've got people we want to contact regularly, we can click add and start putting names in there, and we can create groups of people with the speed dials. Just a note on the speed dials and on the contacts in general, because if you'll see just up here on the right, just above the speed dials, you've got an option to view contacts. I think it really helps if you can maintain a well-ordered Outlook contact profile, because if all the contacts are in Outlook, they'll feed through to Teams automatically, and then you can add them to speed dials very easily, and so on and so forth. So let's just have a quick look at how to make a call. It's fairly self-explanatory, but if you come over to the left-hand side of the screen, click in the box, you can start typing in a number, or you can type in a name if somebody's already in your contacts, or you can use the keypad here, and once you've typed it in, you just press the call button. The drop-down arrow to the right-hand side of the call button, there may be certain circumstances, for example, if somebody's configured you as a group call or as a delegate, you might be able to click that drop-down and choose who to call as. So it's important to know it's there, but probably for the most part people won't use it an awful lot. So just to kind of start wrapping up on the practical side of things, I really wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about presence and about receiving calls as well. There's some of the functionality when you receive a call that you can also use when making a call, so very much worth having a look. In terms of the presence, I'm going to put some stuff down below in as a link to the Microsoft reference, because presence is quite a detailed thing. But in order to manually change your presence, if you come up to the top right hand of the screen here, you'll see your initials. If you click on your initials, you will see all sorts of options for how you might set your presence. But fundamentally, if you just click on available, you will get a menu which ranges from available all the way through to appear offline. In short, if you want to guarantee that you're not going to be interrupted, choose do not disturb, and that will mean that all calls are routed according to how we've already discussed they might be. That's the way to do it. And you can apply a duration for which this will apply as well. So you might say, I just want to be do not disturb for today or for 30 minutes. You can do that in there. It's also worth noting that this presence will automatically update according to whether you're in a meeting based on your Outlook calendar and so on and so forth. But like I say, that can get a bit more in depth. So probably fundamentally all you need to know, do not disturb means you won't receive a call. And if you do want to know more, have a look in the link along with this video. Right, so before we move on, the last thing we want to look at is receiving a call. So the first thing I'm going to do is dial the number, and I'm very quickly then going to put mute on, because otherwise we're going to get some feedback. What you'll notice is that when you receive a call, this dialog box appears in the bottom right hand side of the screen. We can decline simply by pressing the red button, or we can accept by pressing the blue button. And we just experienced what was the feedback. Interestingly, if you ever have feedback in the sort of Teams meeting situation, it's always worth asking people to mute their microphones, and you can, by a process of elimination, work out who's responsible for the feedback. Now, the options when receiving a call are exactly the same as when making a call, and really useful to know. First off, you've got the dial pad. If we were to click on dial pad, we'll get the dial pad up on the screen. So if you're making a call to a company that's maybe got an auto attendant, so it sort of says press 1 for sales, 2 for finance, that kind of thing, you will need to know that that's how to access the dial pad. Next up, we've got hold. So if we're in a situation where maybe we've got a caller and we need to refer to somebody else and get back to them, but we want to put them on hold instead of actually phone them back, press hold and they will hear music and you'll see a timer for how long they've been on hold. To resume the call, just click on resume. Next up, we've got transfer. So under transfer, there are two different options. One is transfer the call directly, and the other one is consult and then transfer. The difference being, if you consult and then transfer, your caller will go on hold in exactly the same way we just talked about, but now we've got the option to have a chat with somebody basically before we put the call through. So you might want to give that person a heads up of what the call's about, for example. Or if we wanted to take the call back, we can just click resume. The next one along, we've got people. So if this was an internal call, internal to the organization, we could add any number of people very easily. If this is for external callers, you may need a conference calling license to do this. But what you would do is just keep typing numbers in effectively, and you can bring people into the call, so you can end up in a sort of conference call situation. I should point out here that the microphone's muted. I've done that in order to prevent feedback, but if you are at any stage wanting to perhaps have a conversation with somebody else such that it's not recorded on the actual call itself, you can click that and it will put your microphone on mute the same way it does with Teams meetings. Just very slightly subtly different to the hold, in that when you put somebody on hold, they're going to hear the music and so on. The other thing to look at here is the More button, and underneath the More button we've got an option to record and transcribe the call. Of course, if you're doing that, you need to make any people on that call aware and have their consent to do it. So I've now finished my call, so I'm just going to click leave. So just before we come on to the last couple of really important notes, I've realised I should have highlighted a couple of boxes on the screen down towards the left-hand side. We very briefly talked about them at the start, but they're ways of quickly switching between the settings in Teams. So the first of those boxes, you can see if you click the drop down, says don't forward or forward to voicemail. As you kind of build your own settings, it may be that you regularly forward to one of your other contacts. This will kind of learn that and it will give it to you as a quick option, but it's a really easy way of doing that. And the other thing just to be aware of is that if all of a sudden you haven't received a call for a whole day and you think, well, I'm not getting any calls, something's not working, probably the first thing to do is to come here and make sure you haven't got it set to forward to voicemail, because otherwise all of your calls are just going to get forwarded directly. My personal preference is probably not to use this feature. My personal preference is to rely on the presence-based routing, so i.e. let Teams have a look and see what's in my calendar and let it route it according to that. But it's good to know that that's there. Also, underneath that, there's a setting if you regularly use other audio devices, and it will kind of learn that on the fly as well. So the last thing to talk about, very important one, is emergency calling. So emergency calling, because Teams is configured based on office location, normally the emergency calling location, that's where a 999 service will see the call as coming from. That's going to be set as wherever the office is. So if you're out and about and perhaps you've got your Teams app deployed on your mobile and you're trying to make a 999 call, really important, let the emergency services know you're not based at the location that may well be appearing on their screen, because that's how it's set in on the back end of it. So that's really, really critical. Other than that, just I guess a bit of troubleshooting. Generally speaking, Teams phone is really reliable. If you're having any issues, like I say, possibly just make sure that your calls aren't all being diverted to voicemail. That's probably the first thing to do. And the other thing is, if you're getting call quality issues, probably just make sure your network's good. So I would recommend, if there's any consideration that the Wi-Fi may not be perfect, use a cable. Cables are very reliable. Wi-Fi is great and it's getting better all the time, but cable's still really, really good. So yeah, use a cable and see if that doesn't fix it. Anyway, that's it from me. So thank you ever so much for watching. I hope it's been useful, and please join us again soon. Put any comments you've got down below, and please do like, subscribe, and get notified. Thank you.